alternate edition here.
So you're the hacker? Hacker? The U of M guy? Minsky? Yeah. Okay.
So it's everything but you.
And what do you do for them?
So we're live now, so
Excellent.
How long have you been doing that?
hi everybody, welcome to the Twin Cities Hacks and Hackers.
Oh, okay.
We're kind of running a little bit late,
So you got like
but we'll get started pretty soon.
computer science or something? Yes. You go get like the
Pull up the video of it?
That's pretty good.
No, leave it down. Well,
I guess we're a bit out.
we're going to do a video, I think, at the very end of bronze.
Oh,
Just a kind of a screen thing of Twitter tracking stuff. But
never mind that. We'll just
yeah.
Looks good on the resume. Yeah. CEH. Probably GC Flex. Day job, working in biometric security. And
developing or
supporting hardware and software configurations for law enforcement, government, military, that type of stuff. So fingerprinting, iris, access, all that type of stuff. Ever since I got all the music business in 08, I just started working for various companies with custom software applications, doing different areas of supporting them. This is really cool because this company, like most people, are like 5 years old. So there's a lot of changeover. Just landed a good gig. It was one position, and some guy was coming up from Iowa to do the weekend stuff, and he left, and then they had one guy moved to his shift, and they had an opening. There you go. What's up,
so they
Yep, and the software, yeah. So we deal with encryption and product support. And outside of that, I have my own shop where I deal with security, networking, small businesses, do support for them, managed IT.
Oh, now I just got the
Yeah, I've been at this for 33 years. Started when I was 12. Yeah, on computers. Oh, I was hardcore writing, but I was programming Apple Basic until they saw it. I just kind of figured it out in my head and talked to other people. I just got sick a couple of years ago. I just been doing it, you know. I was just talking to a guy about the CISSP. I said, it's nice, sir, you know, get some best HR, but we kind of have to build that ACT exam for it. So it's like, kind of cheapens the value. It has use, but I was actually looking into getting it and did some research, and it's more about the certification. It's 10 million, and it talks about feeling theoretical. Did you ever play a backtrack? Yeah, I've got that in one of my laptops here. I brought the show. The Revolution version 5. So. Yeah, me too. Yeah. I got a book that I'm working on. I've got another one where I took all my articles. Don't have one yet. Yeah, working on Dickie. I'm thinking about publishing that. I want to get it all copywritten and that stuff. Well, the one I've got done is just all the articles that I've written for the 4 years I had the music article. And then the other ones, one is, I guess you could say, a self-help, and the other one is a fictional story. That's real. I got articles I really haven't published, so some of that, and then stuff John and working balance and security at the day job, and then I work with my own company at night.
Hanging out with
servers, getting small, like department. So you don't need something.
Saturday night gig.
You come on site and do that.
That scares me, you guys actually own it. Yeah, see, that's
That's not scary.
Oh, yeah.
Facebook is scary.
I mean, mostly in St. Paul.
Most people use default settings. So what they do is they don't turn off like real location on their phone. So you keep it working and take a picture of Marsha and
Where do you work? Here's the, what's that?
Where they can track it. I mean, I'm not taking it out all that, but I was wondering.
So if you want to take your
Do they do all programming or do they use
there might be there is Perl here and there, but I know that they use a lot of all of
yeah, let's sort of bring them into different things together. So I was going to the Facebook
a little bit? We're starting to fall something.
Yeah. We're going to in between those the times so you can sort of track some of the recovery. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah. So,
I'm doing that tomorrow.
now they've got all the skeletons and campsites and
So I got my biggest market at the end of the year.
I mean, it's not about
Neighborhoods up, out there. And you know, it's great when everybody comes out of their house and they're just want to chat. So everybody kind of wants to listen. I'll take 3 beers, take 2 chill.
Yeah.
It's not like
for example,
kids. you're kind of diversity.
Yeah, and then e-democracy group, campuses.
Just like every issue of campus college, you got like the photos out there with the drink choice starting, you got, I don't know, football, and they got used to having like strangers coming out and they were together and people who talk along.
He does a finish test, and she's around whatever drug that is, and you're like, services like that, you know, that take this back and highlight the drug. Basically, like a video,
You guys aren't, you're not a
Anderson is having a meeting in July 17th with John Andrews.
well, because uptake is.
The point is, with respect to Canada's
Yeah, you know,
Somebody has to.
fact of the matter is,
Yeah.
and we all social engineering. So, this is Tim Anderson, and so-and-so's at a meeting, and she's got her laptops here. I need to get in the UBS, I gotta take a couple of calls, once you're in the network, whatever you want.
Unemployment numbers are often they're able to exist without having a business model. And then they fall apart as soon as they have at this stage. I'm talking about everybody I know is but that's probably the people you hang out with. I'm saying like
some guy talked to this.
It's sort of like you tell people what you do, and say,
The neighbors are like, stay away from our kid. Let this alone.
it's not that they see less of you or less, I think less of you as someone who's succeeded in life.
I hang out with the different, I mean,
People say
I've been embedded in that area for a long time. I'm like, no, so I've got to check with them, but I spent a lot of time. Yeah, a lot of medical ones that are doing well. Yeah.
So what happened? What happened? Yeah.
I don't know if I'm there.
But
You're not a nonprofit.
No, legals
That's one of the things I don't know if I can grow fast enough.
and because indirectly,
I think you're allowed to bring a certain percentage of reply extra growth, even as a nonprofit.
and also
Yes, yes. I mean, you think you could,
you empower all over the world. So of course it's like the next door neighbor you go around the house, right next door, and it's like, well, where do you get that new money? That's my company. So there's all sorts of ways that a lot of the stuff that's going on.
well, that's their profit level.
So,
Hey, how you doing?
good. How are you?
Good.
Now services.
Fruit?
Yeah, you know what that's made. Yeah, happy to. You
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, I program. I guess if you're not a journalist,
I guess,
some here. I consider it acting.
Creating something.
It's coming from all over. And they can also
way traditional.
really also
Hack it together.
Literally.
Oh,
That's the original definition.
I think there's somewhere along the line, I guess the definition changed to
Then you have to go to either black hat or white hat. And get into and then you have the anonymous group, which color are they? They're kind of in the middle, depending on where you're falling.
That's interesting. So you program like what you do, like what language, but
I work with
because
working with
unlike other things,
geospatial type. It's something that where the map is integrated. That's very popular in the GIS programming. We're mainly most of the stuff is like and then jQuery is the JavaScript, do a lot of quick stuff on error and then there's also another
yeah, I think I use JavaScript for like writing stuff. Yeah, I'm custom myself applications and
okay.
Say a difference. The developer is the programmer.
I say I'm a web developer. Well, now I do GIS. Before I used to do that. Who do you work for?
No, I'm with Wells. So I think I kind of work with them. They have like no applications and they do like maybe the ones some applications to track assets that are foreign citizens and stuff like that. They do just write code, fill a couple of forms.
Are you working in Java?
No, it's I do mostly DB and DB. Yeah, I think before Microsoft I used something with Java.
I go back. I used to work for
yeah, I think they're still around though, like the Java stuff. I think a lot more secure. Yeah, they bought them, but I think yeah, even though I just bought them. Was it like you were going to change the name or something?
well, Java started somewhat but it's they can write the term for the they can say you're using it for profit. They can do whatever they want.
I think the question is I'm going to go to a serious project where I'm using Java. I think web development, I think in some sense,
It'll
they can like Java.
wait.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Had a text show up to me. What about templates? And it says, it's not serious software.
Okay. Now what are we doing? Now what is that?
Well, you know, you need skill sets here. This is a crash. Well, if I know the new crash mine,
if I didn't know the video, if I did, it's not right.
Oh, yeah.
yes. I tore myself away. Usually works. Well, in the next night. It is alternative.
Quite the same.
What's right? I always think July. I don't expect July to be like September.
July 1st, July, always $37 in the couch. Sure. Yeah.
It's $37 at the time.
I $38, but so it's always.
Well, I'm hoping here really soon. Actually, I'm actually already working for PRP, and then I did the ad for Carmen.
I like that.
Crayons. If I'm going to get one more role in there, finish that tomorrow. But yeah, you know, sometimes it's always easy. It's never a nice thing. But I expect that they'll still do it. When I don't do a lot of work for Senex. Senex is usually farmers co-op, right? And now they're CHS corporation. And they really, we've been doing a lot of little projects for them. About a year ago, they came to us and said, "Oh, we got this marketing campaign that just is terrible. You know, frankly, it didn't do very well. And we want to and I'm like, okay, well, you know, how big is it? What is it?" So they showed me that campaign. It was completely inappropriate for the clients that they were going after, and of course, it consequently drew Florence. I mean, way under 1%. Way under 1%. It was a two-step process. First, we sign up people, and then after they sign up, then people who signed up had to actually submit something. 1% of a very small number of people sent it. So I took the project over, and I said, "Here's what I want. I just want to do all this. Give me a chance, really." And they were a little nervous about it. All the time, I think, designed all the pieces. I laid out the layout schedule, and we designed the sign-up website. Everything. Really good papers, and I really liked it. And we did 30 topics. So yeah, it's like I looked around for a track campaign that done and have not been able to find one. So I think there's a white paper, maybe a speaking tour, yeah, it's really simple. You talk to these people like that, and you give them something they actually want, and then they make it really easy to get it. Like, for instance, the mailer that they would send out saying, "Fill out this form to see if you qualify for the really you send them the form. They already qualified because they're on the freaking mail it now. You know, so 20% of the people went away because you said fill out a form to qualify.
And I said, everybody qualifies. Yeah, I said, yes. And then they add up all of their receipts and send it and made them add them up. I said, what's the first thing you do when you get those? Oh, we add them up again. Well, then why did you make them in the first place? And they're like, yeah, why didn't we have them? And so I made a great big envelope that I called the Great Big Red Envelope. And I said, put your receipts in this Great Big Red Envelope, seal it up, just like Netflix on this. Put it in the mail. We'll send you money. That's it. That's all it is. It's such a cool deal. And we had 3 times the number of people that sent it. And people just dying to get into the book. I'm sorry. That's true. Yeah, it was. That was my whole year. Well, what I'm hoping now is I can make a presentation with all the suggestions. This is and because they really should have that's it was my idea. After that, I was taking and you know, it worked just as well.
If I've got
you want to weather it should be the majority. Next charges apply. No idea what make it simple. There's a button on the website. Please go there. Go to the website. Great, that's it. That would be good. I can do that. No. It just says donate. All you have to do is click it. And it goes to a site where they'll give you the money. You just get the money. There's several out there now that are really good. It's so easy to set up inside. You get all the money. I think 4 tips or something. Some tiny little amount. Yeah, it's way better than and they send a check every month. It's a good site.
So I said,
something like that. Something really simple. That's all that I said. I'm trying to go. It's a really super speed. Push this button and it uploads the logo. You want to change it, you're quite right. And you can write your message, your message, and then that is what. Write another one next to you. Change the socket you want. Awesome. And installing the button. Hey, I didn't.
somebody asked me last night, yeah,
I saw Skoler out there. He doesn't get to go.
So the evidence can say that this guy won.
Right now, I'm a good caller. I have a hard time putting up with my own side. Putting up
That's what I'm looking for. What are you going to the arts and say, no, what's the texture? Whatever you're looking, I'm going to look for. It doesn't have to be good. To me, it's much I don't think it's usually my answer. So, yeah, I'm looking for that. I think I look back at yeah, because it's not, at least as far as I know, we really started. I always was here to this, but every year I see something about bullets. Last year I was like, I teach everything with a slide presentation, nonsense, very last. Just do that. Hello?
Hi!
Remember me?
I should, and I don't, and I
You're the only picture in the baseball game that was in the right hospital just passed the match. Yeah, I shot your face. No, they're down into.
why is it everywhere?
It's so.
Man, it's spectacular!
It helps to have a great lot of and I shot.
Because you have a great complexion, it's not just for me! I have to change it so that they have to
I really got going with You're done, huh?
Already?
Well,
Your point is real taken, I love it. Well, you know, the thing, the irony was, I was quite happy with whatever, I didn't want to go real. But I did, and I too bad.
Now I have
hot right off the range. A lot of the pictures are, because we set all the levels. You actually come right out of the gate.
Get ready!
Right. As I scroll down, it's like, I know. So it was.
I haven't done my job for a long time. March is so pretty big. I got for third. But I think I still have it on my
That is our job.
So if you ever go to
Here's what it boils down to. You are not, and will never have been, much as you can. But, okay, let's say you totally lock down your
Hi, welcome. Please sit down. By the way, we're going to be live streaming this to YouTube. If you've got any questions, Kai, do you want to say anything about where folks can find it? Or well, if you want.
Hi. If you guys want to check it out right now, it's on youtube.com/PRI. Obviously, you guys don't want to check it out. If you want to tweet it or send it out to anybody who might want to watch, check it out. And YouTube's live stream actually archives it, so you'll be able to check it out later too if you want to. Same place.
So thank you very much for coming. Welcome to the second Twin Cities Hacks and Hackers event. We've had phenomenal growth, noted by the national division of Hacks and Hackers, saying they had never seen as much growth as we had had with one event. We're now up to over 230 members here. We had a great first event a couple of months ago with 100 people attending, and I'm just curious, how many of you were there at the first event? Oh, great, so a lot of new people. Matt Thompson came out. He's working for National Public Radio right now, and working with bloggers around the country for him. But Matt, many of you probably knew when he was at the Star Tribune and was creating writing and other things. He spoke at the first event. This event is sponsored by us, Public Radio International, and by Bring Me the News. At the last event, I was chatting with one of the folks from Bring Me the News who said, you really ought to get better beer than what we had at the first event, as we were trying to keep things cheap. And I said, great, are you guys interested in paying for it? And he said, yes. And so Bring Me the News brought us the beer as well as the news. just stand up and give us a quick idea of who you are.
Okay. In addition to buying the beer tonight, I didn't realize, Michael told me last night that I had to say something and keep it down to about a minute. I'm the news director, Breaking the News. We're a tiny little company that's across the alley, just right over here. And we're a news aggregator site, breakingthenews.com. Rick Capcella, a former KARE 11 anchor, is the face and voice of our company. In addition to aggregating news on the website, we also have 30 stations that we do newscasts around the state for, radio newscasts. And so if you have any other questions, I'm just going to turn this back over to you. I don't have anything else to say to us. Just talk to me.
You can say your URL.
Bringmethenews.com. It's real simple.
Those of you who are standing, we'd love to have you in. We're trying to keep this an intimate conversation. There are a couple of chairs here, and there are a couple of chairs in the back there. If you want to bring up a chair, you can find them. Some of them are high chairs, but I'd love for all of you to kind of come into the central area so that you can be seen by our live stream, but also so that we can keep this a conversation and not a presentation, which the panelists are all committed to. I'll say that the Minnesota Journalism Center at the U has agreed to host the next event in the fall. So we're thrilled that they stepped up for that. And Twin Cities Public Television said at the first event that they're interested in hosting an event too. Since this is the second event in Public Radio International, we do not intend to keep them here. We did it because we thought it would be helpful and useful. But if your organizations are interested in picking up the ball, we're looking for people to plan the events. And this event was really planned by a small group of people. And I want to give special thanks to Schreiner. Is that Schreiner of Pyramid Technologies, who really at the first event talked at length with me about the idea of handling security, and that kind of grew into a seed and then expanded with other people. And I'd like to give special thanks to Kay Roseland, who's a local social media master. She helped organize all of this, and in a very humble way. Kay, stand up.
I'm busy tweeting.
I apologize. She's, yeah. And Kay, kind of felt like having helped put things together and seed everything, decided that she would leave it to the panelists to talk and not talk herself. And Kay, thank you for all the work you've done for this. And finally, Peter Edstrom, who most of you have met, or Peter was just here a minute ago, senior developer here at PRI. There he is. And Peter's been instrumental in bringing this all together, the panel and the notices, the meetup site and all of that. So thank you, Peter, for keeping this moving. Again, we're looking for folks who want to get involved and help share the joy of planning these events and keeping folks informed about them. So tonight, Hacked, Why You and Everyone Should Care About Privacy and Social Media. Security, in some sense, is at odds with functionality. I stole that from Peter. If you want to be perfectly secure, you lock yourself in your home, you pull the shutters down. And in cyberspace, if you want to be perfectly secure, you have your computer and you don't connect to anyone and you don't share anything. This was really brought home to me many years ago. I was a reporter for a long time for National Public Radio. And my very first story about the internet was about the first internet worm, or at least the first widely known internet worm. I don't know if any of you remember, in 1988, the son of an NSA guy actually unleashed the worm. Anyone remember his name?
Robert
Morris. Robert Tappany Morris. Very good. He was also has the distinction of being the first person convicted under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And that was a story that I did that it's fascinating because when it happened, the internet wasn't what it is now, but as it shut down at university after university, because those are mainly the places using it in 1988, nobody knew what was going on. And it was, huge front page story, and I did a story by actually talking to computer experts from all over, especially at the NSA. I had a number of anonymous sources who helped out to explain what it was, and the piece I did was really the first explanation of how that works, and I was stunned because I had all of these requests, like 100 requests from the NSA, copies of my piece back then on cassette. because they felt like they wanted to explain to their friends what was actually going on the internet, what the internet was. Or, I mean, back then you had to explain what the internet was when you actually wrote a story or reported a story. So that, of course, got me hooked in understanding this, and I've since moved from reporting to actually working in trying to make the internet and online and mobile and everything else that's coming in social a part of what journalism is, and a part of making journalism something that's a partnership with people. So I'm thrilled to have these folks here who are expert in security talking. We don't want to make this a presentation, but we're going to start with brief discussions by each of them of why they care about privacy and security, and a bit about why you should care. So we're going to start with Lukas, Dickie, who has over 15 years experience growing tech companies, not just in the US, but in Europe and Asia. He founded Linux Radio, which I wasn't even aware existed back in 1999, which is the first kind of Linux community radio show. And then you founded Skypeify, and now Gimigo. And Gimigo's mission is to ensure personal information is accurate, safe, and secure. And, Lukas, tell us why you care about privacy.
Well, you said no presentation, so but I'm a visual guy, so I'll make this quick. But this is kind of fun, actually. So we're here to talk about social media, right? And so what I want to do is say, who knows what this thing is right here? You can go and blurt it out. It's a plane. This is an early day plane. Very simple. All it does is have one steel plate in it, and then this little wood block right here. This is kind of hard. This at the same time. This little wooden block, and then what craftsmen used to do is there's a little spot right back here that you hammer on with a mallet. And what the mallet does is it reshifts this so you can take it in and out. Okay? And so that's how craftsmen used to use this tool. So it's very cumbersome back then. So we've now moved into a day and age where we have these. It's made of steel, it's nice wood handles. So it's a lot easier to use. You can shift the tool right here, or you can shift the blade right, the metal tool. But what I'm getting at is, like social media, this is a tool. Okay? And we have entered this day and age where we've kind of gone through this phase of, okay, what's social media mean? What are the social tools, social networking? And now we've understood, well, these are valuable tools that we can add to our everyday life. And that's exactly where I see privacy and security, is that we now understand that these are tools, these are early day tools, but now we're moving into an age where, okay, how do we now make these tools more effective in our society? And that's really where security and privacy comes into play now. Is, okay, we know how to build it, now what do we do next? And I gotta cut this up short, so, oh, excellent. So I was in California for the second Privacy Innovation Conference, and the one prior to that one was in Seattle, and it more than tripled, I believe, in size. So the companies that were there, Google, Microsoft, Facebook obviously was there. So there's a lot of players now coming into the space that understand there is a critical need for privacy, there is a critical need for security, and how do they come into it from a business perspective that's good for the consumer. But likewise, for developers in the room, how do you come at it with your applications that are effective but also safe for the consumer to use? Because when you're dealing with personal information, it's all about the consumer. So that's, keep it at that and we'll move on.
Great. Next, we have Kelcey Patrick-Ferree. Ferree, excuse me. Kelcey is an attorney practicing in the areas of internet and technology law, and she helps website and company owners comply with privacy and data security requirements, and also helps companies protect their intellectual capital. Kelcey.
Thank you. I just wanted to talk a little bit today about the difference between privacy and data security. To my mind, privacy is the type of information that a company is allowed to collect, and data security is how they have to take care of it once they've got it. There are very few laws that protect privacy with regard to social media or anything else. There are several laws that protect data security, but not necessarily the data that you would want to be protected in social media. There are 3 different regimes for law. There are statutes, regulations, and case law. As far as statutes go, very few, like I said, apply to social media, just COPA and HIPAA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act and the Health Insurance Privacy and Accountability Act. And those govern actual privacy, what people are allowed to collect. The FTC has been instrumental in privacy protection lately. It's been getting aggressive in enforcing privacy policies and making sure that companies aren't engaging in unfair business practices with respect to privacy. Recently, the FTC was testifying before Congress and didn't actually ask for statutes, but strongly implied that they would not object to the passage of statutes that help them regulate privacy better in social media. And our own Senator Franken has been working very carefully in that area. He's been doing a lot of great stuff. So what we come out with is that contracts are what govern privacy right now in social media. Whenever you sign up for a social media company's services, you're signing a contract. And I was going to print out all of the privacy policies of kind of the big social media companies that everybody uses, but I didn't think I could carry that much paper. So basically, it's hard to understand what you are agreeing to when you sign up for these services. And so it's just it's a wild west out there right now, and that's where the legal issues are right now, in flux.
And no sheriff?
No sheriff.
Great. Ron Schreiner, whom I already mentioned in terms of his sparking the idea for this, has spent over 30 years in computing, dealing with different aspects of technology, especially operating systems, networking, and security. He currently works in biometric security by day and owns an IT consulting business by night.
Well, I think it's amazing Kelcey used the word Wild West because I actually have those written here if anyone wants to see. I've actually written it, so we're definitely all on the same page. And you know, I think Lukas here is talking about plain security, which is good because it's a really confusing topic. And really, what we're all talking about here is the integration of work, home, online, and offline, from the legal aspect to the social aspect. And things can be tracked online that can go to your offline life. This is true with, you can see people on their Blackberries, they're logged into their Exchange server, they're working from home. Those walls are coming down. As such, this is creating new vectors of attack that can be utilized against you. And I think what it really boils down to, as was said about the Wild West and no sheriff in town, is we're pointing and clicking and tweeting and Facebooking and MySpacing and LinkedIn and all these different things, and we really don't have an idea of all the ramifications of the buttons we're pushing and how the data flows. We can't control the data that's created about us, but we can control the data that is created by us. And what it really boils down to is what I call the vowels of security, the A-E-I-O-U, which is awareness, education, implementation, organization, and in the end, the U are safe. And I can cover that more in detail. But like the Old West, where the gold and silver and copper were valued, the new black gold is information. And as the famous movie Sneakers said, it's really all about the information, isn't it? Who controls it, who filters it, who spends it, who aggregates it. It's all about the information. Those little data bits and bytes that are put together into one cohesive pile of information about you. That tweet, that phone book, that email, it all can be put together in ways that can be used for good or bad. A tool, like any other, is all in how you use it.
Thank you, Ron. We're moving along at a wonderful clip. Thanks for the discipline. I don't know how I missed getting you up to the front here, John, but if you could move a little closer just because we've got the streaming. John Gordon is also part of the panel and joined. We had Julio drop out today, so in order to fill issues, we replaced him with two Johns, John Gordon, and in a moment you'll hear from another John. John Gordon, some of you may know, was the creator of Future Tense, which you may have heard on radio, a nationally syndicated radio show by American Public Media. And he gave that all up to become the social media and mobile news editor for Minnesota Public Radio, which is the local brand of American Public Media. And so John is kind of dealing in the trenches day to day with journalists who both want to get at that private information and who also have to have relationships with folks. And I'm asking you to talk about that.
Thanks, Michael. I bet there's people in the audience who actually appeared as guests on Future Tense over the years. Patrick, Ron? Garrett, were you ever on Future Tense?
I don't know that I was.
I think you were.
I think that's why I'm so better.
If you were, it wasn't a terribly memorable experience. So the perspective that I would like to bring to this conversation is one as a journalist. This might be very different from what I tell my college-age kids what to do on social networks. But as a social media editor and as a reporter, I want everyone to share everything all the time. Part of it is because, there is a sort of, for us, there's a mass collective intelligence out there to be mined, to help make our stories better, to help give us story ideas. And so I like it when people tweet a lot, when they make their Facebook updates open so I can see them. So, it kind of can make my job easier, and we can make better stories for the news if everything is really open. But we do run into sort of tensions all the time in the newsroom about privacy versus propriety, sort of. One example, recently a Minnesota soldier died in Afghanistan, and we didn't have contact info. We were having trouble finding phone numbers of family members or anything, and we found his Facebook page, and we pulled some quotes and information from there. But as the reporter sort of followed the Facebook trail, we had found friends of his, people in his life who were on Facebook who were saying a lot of things that really looked like we'd like to use in our story about this unfortunate fellow who had passed away. And it ultimately we decided that we were not going to do that, even though these people had all their Facebook postings unprotected. But it's a really interesting sort of ethical question, because even though it's probably legal to do so, and you can make an argument that this was fine to do, there's the question about whether you should. So ultimately we decided sort of not to pursue that path. So that's sort of like one of the daily issues you deal with in privacy and social networks in a newsroom. Another example, how am I doing on time? I need to go?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just stop right there. I'm very disciplined when it comes to clocks. I listen to clocks.
Thank you, John. And in question time, you can ask some of those other examples. And finally, we've got John Hoffus, excuse me, I'm not doing well today, who now works in IT security at Minsky, and lists himself as a home brewer and thus a beer snob in his Twitter bio. Are we okay with our choice of summit? Okay, good. John, tell us about kind of security in terms of universities, where, of course, a lot of the social media began.
Sure. So higher ed, and pretty much built the internet, and subsequently watched it fail in a fiery death with the Morris worm, and then brought it back and started learning maybe we can't just trust everybody in the internet, because while most of the people there we know, we've met, we trust, there are some that may not have the highest goals in mind when they log on. We can see that anywhere from companies to journalists, but not journalists with such high standards as NPR, but perhaps the tabloids in the UK that have been getting so much press lately, perhaps not relevant directly to social media, but still hacking, people sharing information, accessible through technology, certainly not intended to be broadcast widely, but ends up being shared with people that shouldn't have access to it through no fault of their own, meaning they left a default PIN, which, you know, the neckbeard in me wants to scream, how could you not change your password? How could you not change your PIN? But I work in higher ed, and I have a lot of students, I have a lot of faculty members, and if any of you have a faculty member, give them a hug, they need more love. But they can be some of the most frustrating individuals you'll ever meet, because they care very, very deeply about open information and open access, and they do not want to be told how to do their job. They don't want to be told what they need to do to protect their data, even though we have federal law that tells us that they must. And so my job is really balancing the need for data security and finding ways to communicate the importance of, you know, you cannot post grades on your door. I'm sorry, you're done your story. With being able to turn a blind eye to what would cause other security professionals to, you know, roll over in their graves in terms of the state of security on some of our networks, because we have to leave systems and data available for education. I think that I'll wrap it there.
Thank you, John. So at this point, I'm going to open it to the floor. I'd love just some brief comments about why you do or don't care about security and privacy. We want this to be a conversation, not a presentation. And I'll start by saying I recently decided, needing to kind of play and see what people are doing in apps, I just decided, after initial hesitance with sharing everything I do everywhere, that, you know, there is no getting around if you really want to play with some of the newest apps, particularly on Facebook, and use Facebook Connect and all of that. You have to grant permission to have a lot of your information shared. And I think part of what we're living, and my biggest frustration, part of what we're living through is that if you really want to play and know what's going on, you really can't protect your privacy in any real way. And maybe Gimigo will give us an answer to that at some point. Have you launched yet?
We did soft launch in that way.
Excellent. So, but that's kind of why I care about privacy, is because to a large degree, as I gave the example of, you know, if you really want that internet worm that first came out by Morris, you know, if you really wanted to make the internet fully secure, you would dismantle the internet, because the connections themselves and your desire to connect, as I do, with, you know, these apps and seeing what they can do, inherently means that you have a tenuous handle on privacy. So we've got a mic. I asked that people speak into it, and we're running around the room. Who'd like to kind of share what your biggest frustration or desire, or why you care about privacy? Please don't make me call on people. Say your name first.
Oh, my name's Elton. I actually work here at PRI. I never give out any information. If someone asks me questions over the phone or want to interview me or survey me on the street or in stores, never ever give any information, just because I feel like that's mine, and I don't even know if it's what the real reasons are. I'm sure there's some psychological stuff going on, but I never want to do that. And now, because of the internet, I'm doing it without thinking about it, and I don't even know, you know, when I'm giving out information and when I'm not. And so how does a person like me, who's very guarded and doesn't want to give away, I thought about one of the psychological reasons, because I figure people are making money off my information. So in a sense, it's like they're pimping me, and I don't like that. So how does a person like me who's fairly guarded about that, how do we live and interact and do all the groovy things that are out there on the internet?
Excuse me. Do you recycle?
Yes, and compost.
Okay. No, I'm only asking about recycling because other people are making money off your trash.
But they're also that's a fair exchange because they're taking my trash. I'm willing to do that.
Well, there you go.
I'm willing to engage in that piece of commerce. But I don't know that someone.
Yeah, Simon, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that these companies that are asking for your personal information consider it essentially your garbage. In the same way that your recycling pickup guy does.
I don't think so.
Oh.
Well, let somebody else.
Hey, so somebody once told me that if you're not paying for it, you might not necessarily be the customer, you might be the product yourself. And I think Facebook would be a really great example of that. Like, Facebook doesn't make money off of you being on Facebook. Facebook makes money because you told them every single piece of personally identifying bit of information, and they sell to advertisers. I mean, it's not, some shady company that's doing it. It's the website that you're going on. So, I mean, you kind of do make that risk when you use websites, I guess.
All websites?
Well, not necessarily all websites, just websites where you give them your personal information in the first place.
Well, I think to that point, my name is Neil, by the way, Gimtosen, and one quick point that I think kind of reinforces that is that our information is so valued in a social, political, and monetary context that I think the reality is that this problem isn't going to go away. So the interesting question to me is, what do we do about it, right? And because you're not going to make the problem go away. Society's kind of, the genie's out of the bottle, so to speak. But I'm actually launching a company called Telemetry Web, which is very much in the Internet of Things. If you are familiar with that, it's this notion that we can attach sensors to just about anything. And so one of the things that's interesting about that is that it's not so much social media. However, the interesting question to me is that we've got, PCI and other laws on the books that say things like, HIPAA, your health information, your social security number, your credit card, things like that are things that are very easy to identify as protectable pieces of information. PCI says if you're carrying this part of your credit card number, you can only do these things with it. Okay, but one of the things that's really interesting to me as well is all of the pieces of information, whether it's Facebook, whether it's traffic light cameras. I'm talking with a company right now that can tell the health of an animal, human or otherwise, and determine what kind of diseases that thing might have from a distance through a thermal image. And if you start combining these pieces of information, they actually can become personally identifiable, even though you've never shared your name or you've never shared your social security number or anything like that. And those are the questions that are really interesting, because it's pretty easy to make a law that says, don't share your social security number. But the next question is that if I start piecing all these public pieces of information together, I can actually derive personally identifiable information.
My name is Colin Lee, and my name is Colin Lee, and I've been amazed by how much we're so forced to use so many passwords nowadays, and the complexity has had to go up at so many degrees because of the lack of the multitude of ways to hack them and to rainbow attacks and those sorts of things. And we've reached a point now where you get conflicting advice on how to generate your password, conflicting advice on where to store your password. Even if you're a real hacker like me and you know a good way to keep your password in a safe little vault somewhere and in an encrypted file out in the cloud or something. The problem is that at the end of the day, the weakest link is not your password anymore. It never really was. It was always you and your desire to share and your desire to want to be helpful to other people. Because as Kevin Mitnick was famous for saying, it's always the social link that's the weakest. You go after the secretary to get someone's password. We still have to start thinking in better terms now. I'm always surprised how much hackers forget about the most vital link, which is, if you want to be secure, you can't just think in terms of, okay, I'm going to memorize 10,000 passwords. Because that's what it's become.
Just looking at reds.
One thing.
Check. Yeah. All right, there we go. I think part of this is the snake oil salesman part, which is, an old part, teaching people not to be duped. And that's very easy. That's the human element. I recently saw a hacker who was invited to a conference and everybody didn't bring their laptops because they knew he would hack them. So he woke up at 7 in the morning in his boxers and walked around the hotel, getting into their rooms through housekeeping. And that's still an easy thing to do, is for a human to interact with that. The other part of it is just the technology. People don't realize that a 15-year-old could spend a weekend, walk into a coffee shop, and log into everybody's Facebook account while they sit there. And it's not until people know that Facebook will require a secure connection in a coffee shop all the way through. And as it is today, you can go into a coffee shop, connect to Facebook, and a 15-year-old can steal your Facebook account, install an app. Every other computer you go to, he can access the keystrokes you log. And so there are several different layers of this that people need to think about.
Should we do one more comment and bring it back to the panel?
John wanted to talk, and then,
Okay.
I think last comment, and then we'll...
Ken, were you saying that it would be easy to eliminate that social element, or it's easy for the hacker to exploit the social element?
I was just saying that people think of it as such a tech-savvy thing, and to a certain extent it's like, no, just don't be duped by three-card Monty. You have to still remember that it's not always technology that's going to bite you. It's a human being who's clever, who's going to trick you, who's going to use another human being. People's compassion can be exploited, and that's a different risk than a technology 128-bit encryption risk.
Sure. And we're going towards my vein of this discussion about privacy and security, and I don't know how many people here would really benefit from that. So I'll redirect and point out that one of the hackers associated with Anonymous and Nullsec was identified because they had their handle on their Facebook page. I don't know if it was Facebook or another social network with their real name. And so the FBI found them because they posted their name next to their handle. So even the uber elite security techie gets duped. And it's social networks.
I'm going to make one comment, which is that, you can always be fooled by an individual. The real question that comes into play now with social media is the ability to do it en masse, which is different. It's less about one person in one coffee shop. So the idea we had, and this is based on feedback from the first meeting, was to break up the sessions a little bit so that people could actually get to know other folks that they didn't necessarily come with or know before. And so the group that was organizing this decided that we would break up into panels, and each of you should have a number on your name tag, 1 through 6. If you don't have a number, and I'll ask the panelists if you don't, so I'm supposed to be just, okay, so pick one that no one else is in. And again, just whoever feels like leading, we're just going to, for maybe 20 minutes or so, go refill on food and beer, go to the rooms. We have rooms starting with, I think, 6 here. Here. 6 over here, and then the rest are right around the corner here. You'll see numbers on the doors. You don't have to go that way into the office, just wrap around. And the charge for all of you is to, talk about what you think the 3 most frustrating things are about privacy and security on the internet for you, and what you might do about it. And one of you in each group should report back to the group. We'll have 2 or 3 minutes to report back to the group on the 3 major frustrations, annoyances, however you guys want to define it, and what might be done about it. And then we'll move into the second half of talking about those and reacting and commenting. And we'll finally end up with some brief summaries by the panelists of what they've learned or one takeaway they want to have. But grab some food, go into the rooms by number, try not to just head to where you know people. And we'll see you back in about 25 minutes. Okay, thanks.
Oh, you were
Right here, the chatty one. She's going the wrong way. Oh, it's right there.
Well, and so really the direction I want to go is like privacy, sharing, sort of questioning out that. So it's when you share there's a boundary, but if the only boundary you can understand is, well, I like cheese is okay, that's enough. Because the problem is the boss is out there. It's a certain class that but the money is got where it is there. And everybody gets paid to actually going to do your job. Or if you promote that on Facebook and your insurance company, your next insurance company, buys information from someone's choice point that may have to do with Facebook. They can know that she has. And so there is no way to might have a scan your walk in and figure out what you said. No pre-existing conditions. It's so funny because you want to share it, you want support. But if that's associated with insider control, well, see, I use it a lot. I just very, very aggressively filter what I post.
I'm sorry, Jack.
Oh,
my memory is so bad.
No. It's fine.
Right?
Office. Yep.
Okay. So 5 is over here.
Yeah.
And 6 is here. The rest of here.
Where are the restrooms?
Right. Just straight to the right.
All right.
Yeah, nice. will just now.
been listening to your podcast lately. Bought a Mac.
Thank you.
30 days ago, so I got to look for the Mac stuff. I've been very impressed.
Well, thank you.
I've gone back through all of them. I think I'm caught up now.
That means
you've made my commute a lot more.
That means a whole lot. It really does. I don't always talk about tech, but
I'm trying to take some of that advice and not install things before I figure out what's actually
Do you read my website?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, thanks, Bob. Bob?
Yeah.
Do you have a car?
Really?
Do you have a car?
No, I don't.
That means what?
And tell your co-host he does a great job too. His other one.
Yeah, Mike Hurley. Yeah. And Julio, who's on the episode that went live today, was supposed to be in iPad Meets business. Yep, and he's also the tech reporter for St.Paul Pioneer Press, and a really good guy. We actually, the episode that went live today is the first of 2 parts with him. He's on the next one, and actually these two are the favorites I've ever recorded. We just had a great time talking about all sorts of things. It was great.
Hey guys.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good. I love your tweets back.
I mean, you should be here.
I feel like I should
Okay, let's pull into the room, get food, drink, and come on in. Okay, any of you in the back of the room, it'd be great to have you come a little closer. Any of you in the back of the room, it would be great if you could come a little closer, fill in the seats, make a little more intimate discussion. This is social engineering. And Hacks and Hackers, as an organization, is about bringing together 2 groups of people that haven't interacted very much. Hacks and Hackers. And I'm pleased to see that we've got some folks, too, who are either hacks or hackers and come from different fields. One of the exciting things, I was telling someone, one of the things that Public Radio International has been doing is this is new space for us, a little over a year, and we've got extra space. And so we actually invited a startup company in to help incubate them, help them find investors and the like, but have them in the office for 6 months to try to just mix up cultures and mix up ideas. And that's very much the spirit of Hacks and Hackers, just trying to mix things up. And ultimately, and maybe we'll spend a few minutes at the end, we love ideas on where we can go with Hacks and Hackers in terms of getting people together to do projects potentially in the like. It's only our second event. We're trying some new things at this event. I'll make a pitch now. Afterwards, we'll send out a notice to you. If you can just quickly put up some comments, provide it was really helpful in planning this event to hear from people about what they didn't like about the last event, like people who said I didn't really get to meet other people. So that's where the small group meetings came. Did people enjoy the small group meetings? Was that good? Okay, great. So what I'd like to do, to keep it a little organized, is I'd like each group just to share some of those top 3 annoyances and/or solutions or questions or whatever. And I'd love for volunteers to start. And we're going to run through this. You've got 2 minutes to do this, 2-3 minutes. And we can have a little bit of comment back and forth, but I want to make sure we get through to everyone. So who would like to start?
Can you stand up? My name is Fru. I currently work as a programmer, so I'm always kind of interested in security and stuff. I think my group was very interesting. We had a great conversation and kind of focused around Facebook and how to deal with security on Facebook. And I think one of the points that came up was the users providing content, and in so doing, they kind of breach their own security. Like if someone is drunk on Saturday night and you come in and post something funny on Facebook, it may be funny when you're drunk, but when you're not drunk, it's not funny. So
it's still funny.
Yeah. So, or maybe it's still funny. So that kind of security, how do you deal with that? Because you could write the best code you want, but it's not going to prevent that from happening. And then also kind of going to another dimension of the corporate side, like Facebook. The stewards of our data. What do we expect from them, right? So what should they do when I maybe put my phone number or my email address on Facebook? What should I expect Facebook to do with that? And then it came to some conversation about Web 3.0 and all building on intelligence, on mass collective intelligence. I think somebody mentioned that over here. And for that to happen, they need as much information from you so that they could do targeted ads and give you the best service advertisements that they can. But in so doing, are they infringing on your security, or are they doing you a service? So there's a fine line there that we kind of talked about. I think it was a great conversation. If somebody wants to add.
And I'll just throw out periodic questions so I have a little microphone and be the moderator. Is there a market for a company, say an Amazon competitor, that says we're not going to sell your data, we're not going to basically pass around all that information. We're just going to sell it to you in a secure way, so when you buy something, you don't have to worry about what you're telling us.
Does anybody actually do that right now? I mean, does anybody just sell something and they don't ever trade your material?
Anyone know of a case?
The majority of companies hold on to your data. I mean, look at all the small companies you do business with.
I don't mean hold on to. I mean trade, sell, exchange. Does anybody not do that?
And that was the
services?
question, right? Is there a market for that?
Certainly. Gimigo. I'm just not saying. I mean, no, really. That's the approach. That's all we deal with is personal information, and we're not selling it to advertisers. We are legitimately working. We're facilitating data between the end user and businesses and individuals that you trust. I mean, that's our business. So, yes, there are companies that are not going down the advertising route, and Amazon. I'm pretty sure they're still selling data, but. What we had conversed about in our session. Oh, hey, you were in my session. Well, we already talked about it there. So, Paul had an interesting thing that he also brought up was coming from the recruiter side. He wants just to suck in all the information.
You also post everything online.
Yes. he's like John right here. He wants everyone to post as much information as they want, as they can about themselves. But now there's a flip side, because now that John wants to go down a different path and have a new firm, he's more concerned about, sorry if I'm making this public. Okay. I'm not speaking on behalf of the company. The flip of the coin now is he's concerned about the information that was out there prior to this. And so it's kind of changed to a different perspective for Paul right now.
So the idea is this is, I'm not shy on Twitter about saying the Yankees suck. Or that say maybe some really large companies in town, maybe I wouldn't go to work for, but now they may be a client of my firm. So I've said stuff in the past.
Yeah, but would you really ever take the Yankees as a client?
No.
So this is, I think, the point that we were trying to make in our group discussion with St. Paul, is that you need to be careful about what you share, but it doesn't mean you can't share anything. If I share that I hate the Yankees, that's okay. And if you don't like me because I hate the Yankees, or if you don't want to hire me because I hate the Yankees, then either it's your loss or I don't want to work for you anyway. But that's a decision that I'm conscious of before I tweet anything. I always have that moment where I stop and read something before I post it on Facebook or Twitter.
I just want to find out now, are there any legal ramifications in what John was just saying, in terms of if you don't want to hire me because I'm a Yankees fan?
Well, employment is not my area of law. But so far as I'm aware, not the hating the Yankees thing, there are certain protected classes. You don't want to be, going on and finding out someone's a member of the Asian bar and not hiring them because they're a member of the Asian bar. That would be a problem. But, there's not anything that I can think of.
Yankees are a protected class.
Yankees are a protected class.
In the broader sense, Kelcey, using information that you find freely. I mean, there's no tracking for whether you're looking for someone on the Asian bar or not.
Strictly speaking, no.
There are now, in the HR recruiter world though, there's starting to be a differentiation between who's sourcing people and who's recruiting people. A sourcer's job will be, I'm going to go out and find as much information on someone as I can. I'm only going to hand over the pertinent information to the recruiter, the hiring manager. So the hiring manager never saw the crappy stuff he posted on Friday night when he came home from the bar, the Yankees suck, or that I hate the Badgers. Right? So the hiring manager, there's a filter in there that the hiring manager will never be able to see. And so the HR recruiter world is getting into that now where we're saying, look, we're going to see all this stuff, but we're going to filter what we'll ever get to so we don't have employment, hiring, legal issues.
So that brings up an interesting question for me. Then do you become the company in the middle? The reason that someone would come to you as opposed to going and submitting an application directly with the company might be because I'll come to you, let you do the negotiation and keep them, they trust you and they won't go searching for my Facebook pics, because they're talking to you. I mean, you get what I'm trying to say, that you become the middleman.
So the one thing we were talking about is now as I start my new firm, what I may have seen on somebody's profile before, but now they might work for me, how am I going to handle that?
Right.
And so there hasn't been any case law yet, though, on the middle person, the search firm. What did I know? What did I not know? What got passed on to a hiring manager? What didn't?
Right.
But companies are intentionally trying to put layers in now so that whatever the end result is, they didn't know all of the dirt to begin with.
Are you liable for that? If the company then comes to find out later, hey, this person posted thus and such on their Facebook
so we're
page.
going to Paul for not telling us.
So far, there's no case law, and I'd like to keep that.
Paul, this assumes the hiring manager doesn't know how to use Google too, or doesn't learn how to use Google, because that could blow the whole game right there.
Well, but it also assumes that potentially the hiring manager doesn't want to do that.
Doesn't want to.
Yeah, but I think that'll change as younger people become hiring managers. It's just before you go in to interview the person, you hit Google and see their Facebook page.
But no. Their lawyer will tell them not to. That's the point of it, isn't it? It's the point of having that third party intervening. So not saying, oh, this person is a member of the Asian bar, this person is a Muslim, this person is not white, this person is female, whatever. That's the point of having this intervening party.
It's also why a lot of hiring managers are no longer doing reference checks. So the HR person, the recruiter person, the search firm's doing it. It's making it so that the hiring managers may not have all the information to make a different decision once they know more stuff. Or some employers now will say you can no longer, there's HR practices now that are saying you can no longer give a LinkedIn recommendation to a coworker, that only an officer of the company can do that. So this is going, and I'll stop because we could go for an hour. But
okay, and I do want to get back to reporting. Unless are there some direct comments from this? But I do want to hear from the groups. Any? Okay, another group. Want to volunteer? We had 6. We've heard from 1. 1.5. Just
we've got about 5 now, so we're okay with 5. I can speak for 6.
You got it.
Hi, my name's Noel. I'm with KFAI. We had a couple of things in Group 6 that we came up with that were frustrating. The presiding thing was passwords, and not overly complicated ones, but limitations in passwords, not being allowed to have uber secure passwords. Having, you have to have it between 6 to 8 characters, no special characters, things like that, and that was a bit of a frustration. Another thing that we were interested in was some kind of reverse aggregator to find out who had been looking at your information, where your cookies went, who had pinged you during the day, things along those lines. As well as the frustration of when you do forget your password or when you need to call someplace for service, the list of stock questions, the what's your name, what's your mother's maiden name, what's your social security number, after you've already entered this information into their automated system, or even if you're doing a live chat. It's very redundant and frustrating, and almost makes people feel like there's no reason for them to be putting this information in to begin with.
Just a quick check. Is there a legal reason that they do all of that? 18 questions?
Well, it's just identity verification. I don't know why they do it more than once, so they're just making sure you really do know your mother's maiden name.
So this comes from the fact that authenticating you are who you are is hard. And so the only thing we can do from a technical perspective is come up with a couple of things that, if got breached, may not be private data, and so we don't have to tell you they got breached. But they're also things that you're not going to forget. The problem with that is a lot of us had first cars, and a lot of them were red. And so the color of your first car is not a good security question, because
that's how Sarah Palin's emails happen.
Exactly. And yes.
What Paris Hilton says, and the name of her dog.
Basically, any celebrity that's been hacked. The gentleman back here mentioned Paris Hilton and the name of her dog. Celebrities that get hacked through the password recovery. I use a password safe, and all of my passwords are ridiculous because I don't have to remember them.
Wait, what is it? Describe that.
Well, so it's a piece of software that manages and stores all my passwords. And when I sign up for a new site, like when I signed up for this event tonight, when I was asked to participate in the panel, I went into my password safe and I said, give me a new password, and it was like 18 characters and completely random, and I would never remember it. It would take me 5 minutes to type it. But the software I use lets me hit a command, and it automatically fills it. I don't need to know it, and it syncs to my phone, it syncs to my Dropbox.
I use 1Password on the Mac.
Yeah, that's what I'm using. So now I use 1Password on Dropbox. So now they give you that one so you can go hack.
Oh, but Dropbox is really secure.
So different. The thing is, any site where I had an account for a while and I put real answers into my password recovery fields means all any of you would need would be to know that my cat's name and my mother's maiden name, and that I had a red truck as my first vehicle. And you might be able to get into my account even though my password is something that would take me 5 minutes to type, and it's my password.
Pro tip, use a strong password for the answer. That's what I do.
Okay, I'd like to get Mike, so if you do have something to say, raise your hand, we'll get Mike to you. But we need to continue because Bill's have more.
To speak to that, just a quick thing about the password safety. The only time that I find that is very, very difficult to deal with is when somebody dies. My father-in-law recently passed away, and he was a nut about password security. So his wife had a heck of a time trying to figure out even what the password to his credit cards or to their utility bills, because that wasn't what she did, it was what he did. And his over-security had not left any central place for her to be able to find that. So I feel like people should at least have a conversation with their loved ones about where their, you know what I mean, about where their passwords are, because when that
my wife can recover mine, but there are services that actually broker in saving those passwords.
And then the last thing that we had was the pseudonym. It wasn't a problem, it was more of a question. Do you exist online as yourself or as some sort of amalgam of all of your favorite movie stars or whatever? It's the question of to be or not to be yourself online. And we just wanted to put that out to everybody to see the benefits and downfalls.
Do you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah. Regarding the password, not to beat a dead horse, but here's some real world tips. But I'll be quick because I know we're running short on time. There's a program called Password Safe. It uses one password to get in. I keep that updated. It's in a safety deposit box. My wife has it. If I die, she gets in. She has my life. When you do passwords, do alphanumeric, upper, lower case. So what I find works is a rhyming scheme like $3G4TXV7D1. Something like that. Yeah, I know. It works for me. But it does help to do alphanumeric, upper, lower case. And then instead of putting red car, put in a different password as your secret question. So instead of your mother's maiden name, it could be that as well. And the term for what's being passed around here is password atrophy, which is where people get so tired of passwords and they do reuse of those passwords. And that's the other thing, unique password for each site. So the security in itself isn't a setting or hardware or software, it's a mindset. And it's changing that mindset is really the crux of it all.
Just a quick comment about the pseudonym thing. You know that in the contract that you sign when you sign up for the service, that it can be a violation of the contract to use a pseudonym. Facebook is one of the companies that has that for one of its things. They were enforcing it for a little while. I haven't heard anything about whether they've been continuing to enforce it. I've seen a lot more pseudonyms lately on my friends' lists. So just something to keep in mind.
Google Plus has also been catching a lot of heat for trying to enforce real names. Same, but one response to the question about pseudonyms briefly. If you use a pseudonym and you log into one account under your pseudonym and then you log out and you log into another account, they're linked. Google knows that pseudonym is you. And from that point forward, that pseudonym is now you. And so the fact that Fluffy Bunnies was your pseudonym, that now equals...
How did you know?
Fluffy Bunnies now equals Paul Bettys, which rhymes, that's how it is.
Good to see you again, John.
On the side of Ron's thing about using only different passwords for every website, I don't know, just something that I have heard that's a really easy fix for it is just use like the first 3 letters of the website that it's on, either at the beginning or the end of your password that you normally use, because the way that they get you is if they get your password in one place, they'll just write a script and plug it into every other useful website on the internet. So even if you change it by 1 letter, but 3 is good because more is better. You'll be more secure like that, and it's an easy way to remember it. You just put GOO in front of your Google password or FAC in front of your Facebook password. Just a quick tip.
Sorry, I have a quick comment to make on the point to be or not to be yourself online. I think you could ask the same question to be or not to be yourself at work, right? Because your professional persona may be different from your personal life, which again, I think from my philosophy could be different from my online persona. You know? So I could define what I want to be online, maybe a tech-savvy blog where my Facebook page is just post about text and stuff like that. That's my own identity, that's what I want to pursue. Or I could make my personal life just post everything I eat every day, or whatever I decide. So I think it's something people should think about and work on it.
Some more reports. Another group report, please.
I can go. I'm Ojeda, and we're going to talk about a lot of the same things, not surprisingly. And the first thing I kind of brought up my own personal agenda was you can't talk for 45 seconds about privacy and publicity, being online and sharing information online without somebody going, oh, Facebook. Facebook is the devil. Facebook is, where, And then the next thing someone will say is, yeah, but I don't actually put important things on Facebook. I know they're doing that, so I don't let them have important data. And then the next thing they talk about is the fact that they've got every single possible service that Google has to offer. They're saying, every email is archived, every phone call is archived, every search they make, every contact they make, every site they go to is complete. I've never seen in the history of time, and there never will be, hopefully, another data set as large and significant and comprehensive about every single human being that interacts with anything. And people are just totally happy to eat that stuff up. So that's my personal thing. While critiquing Facebook for their privacy concerns. So that's my little agenda, and I kind of went to bat with that. And then we each kind of brought something else in. Another big thing is just the same thing we've been talking about all along is individuals taking enough responsibility for their own actions and their own, are they maintaining their software? Are they maintaining good passwords, obviously? Are they, they hyper-focused on being super secure in this one area and then just totally being lax in this other area? Like maybe you've got a really super awesome, amazing password, but it's on a post-it note on your phone or something, So I think people don't take enough personal responsibility is another thing that kind of came up in the group. And then the third thing is sort of the other side of it is people who are, very concerned about protecting their data, and they're like, oh, I never use Facebook because they do bad things, I heard. And then they fall out of the loop, and they don't know what's going on. And somebody expressed that you don't want to not use these services because then you'll become a relic or a dinosaur at your job, or become irrelevant, or not be able to function in society. So with your concerns and reservations, you still feel sort of forced into participating in these things. So.
No, but if you use by we're forced right now. We're on camera, we have our opinions, and we're going to be on the web. Everybody can hear it.
And my password is Fuzzy Bunnies.
What flavor is that for?
I just want to point something out. I have an Evo 3G or 4G or whatever the heck this is. Not the 3D. I don't know one of those. But one thing that's interesting is we figured out that one thing I love about this phone is when I'm driving and I need to send a text message, I'm not going to type it. But there's a nice feature in here where I can hit the voice command and I can talk to it and it'll translate that to text and then send it for me. But then we figured out that it's not processing the data on the phone. It's actually sending it back to Google. Google's then processing the data and then returning it to the phone. So I'm concerned about privacy. My blood was boiling at that point once I figured that out. However, but I'm also speaking to you in a public setting right now. So it doesn't really matter because they're going to process it no matter what. And someone here with a recorder is going to process the voice if they want to. So it's really about data is getting out there whether you like it or not. It's just part of our society. And we talked about this in our group. It really gets to the point of knowing when your data is going out there versus what is happening with that data, and that's really two separate things. We can't live under a rock about this. But it also with Facebook and with Twitter and all of those, I rarely use those sites, and I'm still part of society, and I still know what's going on. So you can have a nice bridge between the two worlds. But that's just kind of my 2 cents on that.
I was in the same group, and the counterpoint that I brought up to the first point about how we pay too much attention to Facebook privacy and not enough to Google is I challenged the group to identify when they've ever really been harmed by all the data that Google holds on you. And years of covering security, I know plenty of bad stories about how people were harmed by various data breaches, but in aggregate, I feel like we are too scared about security issues and privacy issues. And for the most part, most of us operate just fine on social networks, and we share lots of data without anything harmful ever really happening to us. So I think, in deference to folks like John who spend a lot of time worrying about security, I think we can worry too much. Mm-hmm. And I think for the most part, we're okay, and we get too scared.
Uh-oh. You can see them raising their hand.
Well, I think to your point, I think it puts us through a filter bubble. So if all of a sudden they have all this information about me, they can target ads toward me, and all of a sudden Google can know exactly what I might be interested in a Google search. In Facebook, they kind of do the same thing, where I may be posting about something particularly, so I'm going to only see information about that from other friends. So you can try it for yourself. But they essentially keep information from you, kind of put you in this area.
And you think that's a great harm?
I think it is, because it kind of keeps you from knowing things that you might otherwise want to know. It's all algorithmic; they're all done by computers. So to that extent, I think so. Yeah.
Well, that was another thing we raised in the microphone. I work in radio.
There's a radio.
And the other point that, to your point that we raised in the group, was that increasingly we're being forced to make these choices between sort of full participation in society and privacy. Like, you can choose to, you don't have to give your social security number to anyone. They can deny you the service. You can not give your zip code to, the pet food store. You can opt out of Facebook. You can not be on Twitter. But you really do. I really do think you lose full participation in our culture when you choose not to do those things. So it's like a sort of a choice we have to make. I think either sort of be a dinosaur who doesn't get all the good stuff because you're so concerned about privacy.
So, I think more to your point, security is largely a fairy tale that we tell ourselves to help us sleep comfortably at night. The fact is that if someone wants to get at you, they can get at you. If some company wants to target ads to you, they will figure out how to do it. Facebook, Google+, Twitter, these things have just made it easier for them. They've been targeting for years. They've been reading on a grocery store level what consumers typically buy at specific grocery stores in specific neighborhoods and specific markets, and stocking the shelves accordingly, planograming the stores accordingly. The only way to be completely secure is to not have data at all, and that's obviously just impossible, right? Osama bin Laden stayed disconnected from the internet for years and still didn't stop the U.S. government from finding his porn stash, right? So, it's eventually, if someone wants it bad enough, they will get it and find it. And so, I think what we all have to do and what we all have to realize is, with that in mind, how much are we comfortable with how comfortable are we with how easy we make it for them?
I just wanted to say that I can't give you an example of how Google has been causing problems, economic problems, because of all the data that it has. yes, the search customization you were talking about is a huge problem for trademark owners because they're only getting information about their own products when they're searching, but they're trying to find infringers. And so they can't find these people who are trading on their names. I actually had someone tell me a story about she uses Google Analytics to search for her trademark and similar trademarks, and it wasn't giving her anything, so every few months she goes and actually does a search and uses a few different search engines, and she did find an infringer, but only because she took the initiative to go ahead and use a different search engine than Google.
There was another example which I found kind of creepy, which, Noel, were you the one who told us? About, somebody told us about getting a different price on, who's that? Jeremy left. But he said that when he was looking for an airline flight, that the search tools used, I don't know if it was Kayak, I don't think he knew what it was, but that the more you looked for a particular flight, the more desperate they knew you were for the flight, and that he said, a friend told him that by removing all his cookies, he was able to get a flight that he kept seeing for $650, for $250, because they knew that he was looking for it. Now, to me, maybe it's an urban legend, but
I'm trying to
One of my friends works for one of the local airlines here, and he participates in writing that code right there.
Not an urban legend. You heard it here first.
So the flip side of that is, if you want something that's expensive on Amazon, add it to your cart and don't check out. Don't buy that item for a month or two. Pretty frequently, that price will drop 2 or 3 times before it'll just go back to where it was.
And then it'll suggest it back to you.
Yeah. Well, maybe. If it's still in your cart, it won't suggest it, but it'll show you next to the suggestions. But if it's sitting in your cart long enough and it's expensive, they're thinking, well, maybe it's too expensive. Maybe if we just bump it down a little bit. But the same thing can happen if you're Googling for a price and you land on that is. But the question is, what is someone else? Okay, so I'm gonna give the microphone up in a sec here, but so this is gonna be extreme. Everyone brace yourselves. But the Holocaust occurred because we didn't have any concept of data privacy. Okay, so this is really, really extreme. This is really inflammatory.
I don't think it's. I think that's.
Well, it was going to happen anyway. There was going to be some group targeted as a scapegoat for power play, and I'm really, really treading on thin ice here. So I don't want to go out further, but Germany targeted Jews. They walked into synagogues and collected registers of generations of Jews because they kept really good records. And they walked out and they said, you're a Jew, you're a Jew, you're a Jew. And that's it. We don't know what someone else is going to do with this data in 5, 10, 15, or 50 years. This data is generated. It's on a hard drive. If Google sees a good enough reason to, or if Facebook does, or if anyone else does, they're going to keep that data. And they're going to keep on selling it, or they're going to hold it until it gets to the best point.
I don't think that's fair.
Let me pull away from the Holocaust.
Oh, no, it's really extreme.
To a simpler example, we're talking about the Internet of Things. Your refrigerator knows what you don't have milk. If a company, your local convenience store, knows that you don't have milk, could they raise the price on milk because they know you're desperate? I don't know. It's interesting. Can I also, just as we move, one thing, I'd like to also move, because one of the aims of Hacks and Hackers is to get creative people together solving problems, not just raising problems. And I just want to note 2 ideas that have come up. One was Fru's idea that you could actually have a company that prevents you from doing stupid things. It could be like a personal service. You can call up or that monitors your posts for you if you get drunk too often. So just an idea there. And Noel, there was an idea in our group, which was if you could make transparent all the information that's flowing out, and I think, Pat, you had brought this up. If you could make that transparent, and someone said that there were some programs to do that, but clearly none that are widely popular, where you just get a real stream when you're on a site, a real stream that's telling you what data is flowing, so that you kind of know, make it transparent. So opportunities for entrepreneurs, tax managers to get together, other things.
Okay, we've covered a lot of the similar stuff, but one thing we haven't really covered is the future. And that's really what I want to talk about, and I know we're running for that time. But it was mentioned earlier, the Wild Wild West. Well, we're no longer in the Wild Wild West. The frontier has been settled. We're here. I'm going to go a little bit technical, but I'll keep it short. The internet right now works off of what's known as IP version 4. So it's 3 numbers, dot, 3 numbers, dot, 3 numbers, dot, 3 numbers. The new version, of which the internet now runs on about 10%, is called IP version 6. It's a hexadecimal system that instead of being 32 octet is now 128. But in layman's terms, what that means is there will be enough available IP addresses for every grain of sand on Earth to have its own unique DNS reachable IP address. So 5-10 years down the road, what you'll see is you'll have your smartphone and you'll look at your refrigerator and say, oh, I better adjust the temperature because it has an IP. Oh, my car's running. Turn that off. Better lock the door on my house. Everything will have a unique DNS reachable IP address. So what does that mean? That means your entire life is online, and not just you can be tracked, but your car, your house, everything. And I think social media is merely the beginning of that. It's going to get a lot more invasive. And we're covering a lot of good things here, which need to be talked about, but we also need to look 10 years down the road, and where do you see that? And what can you do today to develop better habits so that when that time comes, you're prepared?
That was nice and concise. We'll keep passing around. We're getting toward the end. I'm going to ask the panelists to make final statements in a minute. But, and I do want to just have 1 minute, 2 minutes of brainstorm on what we want to do next with Hacks and Hackers. But a couple last comments.
Okay, it is very important to be paranoid, and having been to a lot of tech conferences, that's usually what you walk away from. But there is definitely hope. There are people out there who you may consider weaselly people publicizing bad things, but it's good to have these things in the public light. You mentioned a good project in reference, which I think is the Locker project, is one of the big ones. The idea there is you give your data to them, and then anytime you authorize Facebook and all of Google and any other site to access that, and anytime that company shares it, you would know about it. And I think that is where the future is headed, and hopefully we can get there where you give your information once, and anytime it's shared, you'll know where it's going. So that's my hope for where things do eventually end up, and the Locker project is trying to get there.
Has any group not reported? Okay. So final comments? Well, we do have a group that didn't report.
Yes.
Who's going to do it? You are?
I guess I'm the commentator for our group. So we covered a lot of stuff. A lot of it has been kind of reiterated here. Again, my name is Sana Lee. I remember best what I said, so I apologize to the group. Very one-sided here. I own a small web development company, and I see the concerns I have are really kind of split into two. There's on one hand, there's the privacy sharing concern, where we're choosing to use sites like Facebook and Google and all these others, where they're just mining that data and we're not sure what they're doing with it. So that I feel kind of comfortable with because we can choose not to use them, although it is inconvenient, but we do have things that we can do. On the other hand, there are hackers that are hacking into websites, and that's something that they're stealing, they're breaking in a sense, and that's much harder to combat, I think, because now as the owner of a web development company, I either need to hire that hacker or someone who's as good or better than him, and suddenly it becomes expensive and it's just kind of pointless, all for what? So in an ideal world, hackers would only hack for good, but how do we do that? I don't know. So we talked about that. We talked a bit about schools and privacy concerns there with the children. There was a lot of really great conversation. I'm sorry, I don't remember it all, but
I'll hold it. And final comments before we move in. Colin.
First, in response to the web development thing, I would say that through the 90s, everyone, aside from social attacks, the number one attack was the buffer overflow. We creamed that. It's done pretty much, and with a few minor exceptions. But this, yeah, I know.
Can you just translate the buffer overflow? Don't immediately call up images.
You have a 5-gallon bucket, you pour 10 gallons of water into it. The bucket is overfull, it just sits there and shakes and quivers.
You put too much data into a field or in a form, for example.
That was the Morris.
The Morris worm was a buffer overflow. It was a famous one. And what we did is we came up with a solution, I say we, but it was actually AMD that came up with something that had been done many years before in other processors. But anyway, moving on, the attack nowadays you have to worry about as a web development firm is primarily your database, specifically SQL injection attacks. And that was what Anonymous and LulzSec and all these guys have been using primarily, even before they used the social attack when they broke into HB Gary. The first attack that got them in the door was the SQL injection. And there's no easy answer to that one, unfortunately, because it's primarily in good code auditing. But if you switch to a non-SQL database or you find some way to, what's that? Encrypt, you said?
Yeah, that was the problem with Sony is they had all their, sorry, I'll give it back, I'm sorry. The Sony had username and passwords in clear text, and they didn't encrypt the fields in the SQL database, so that's a major problem.
Well, there's a difference between hashing and encryption.
Right.
Anyway, well, last comment, real short. You were talking about the cars, and it's actually becoming a reality really fast because the electric cars need the ability to share your social data out on the internet. And the Nissan Leaf, with the Ford Focus, and the Chevy Volt, all three of them interact directly with the internet anywhere you drive. So you can, smartphone-enabled cars, and I'm serious.
So why do they need that?
They use it to share information about what your charge state of your vehicle is if you're not sitting at it at the moment.
It's not a need; it's a feature.
It's a feature.
I think, Elton, real quick.
I just thought about this, or thinking about this, is that the idea that technology is so far beyond the average person to understand. What does that do psychologically to humans? And has anybody, I'm sure lots of people are thinking about that and investigating that, but what's going on with people that we understand the plane, but we don't understand the internet?
Hopefully it brings us back to the 60s, free love, drugs, all sorts of
I
don't know what it's doing. I said, no, 60s, free love, drugs.
Oh, free love, drugs.
Peace. So I'm going to ask the panel at this point for just a 1-minute kind of wrap up about something you learned, some insight, or some lasting message you want to leave for everyone. Kelcey, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, thank you. I guess this has felt pretty technologically focused, and so I just wanted to say something that maybe would be helpful to the journalists in the room. When you're thinking about this stuff, why does it matter to you? And one thing that I thought of is that those contracts that you sign when you sign up for services, Twitter and Facebook do not actually agree or guarantee in any way that your private messages to people are going to stay private. So when you're talking to sources who want to stay anonymous, don't use Twitter or Facebook.
I read those agreements. I knew no.
Lasting messages. I don't have any epiphany messages for anyone, but I would say there is nothing to fear about your approach to privacy and security. And we talked about this in our group, and really it's a developer's job to deal with those technical issues. It should not be the consumer. Okay, and so from a business perspective, really we're entering this phase where make it easier for your consumers, but also ensure that they're protected. Ensure that their information is secure, ensure that it's an encrypted form. And if you can't do it in-house, then hire a company to help you out with that. Don't just try to sweep it under the rug and say, we'll deal with this later, because it will come and bite you in the ass again later. So, but it's really about the consumer also being aware of the information that they're putting out there. So if it's a service like Facebook or Twitter and you're not paying anything for it, obviously they're making money off of it. That's a no-brainer. But those are things to think about before making those information available with those services. That's all I gotta say.
I'm going to mix this up a little bit and give you the last word.
Okay. So I made a comment or two that were strong, but and my point isn't get off the internet and unplug your computer, pull out your hard drive and destroy it, because that's not realistic. It doesn't make sense. Can't be afraid of the technology, and we need to use it, but we need to learn to use it responsibly, and we need to work with companies that are actually transparent and communicate with us what they're going to do with our data. And if we don't understand that, don't put data there that you care. Don't communicate with sources. Don't send messages to your wife that might be, not suitable for your children's eyes, because you don't know where they're going to go. And I think somebody mentioned that Google Plus did a better job of protecting data that somebody posts than Facebook. Well, the example is your grandmother is going to do. Your grandmother is going to do better with navigating the controls within Google Plus than within Facebook. Except your grandmother isn't on Google Plus. I'm guessing. But either way, you're putting a lot of trust in the users that you connect with on that network, and you're putting a lot of trust in the company that runs that network. So if you trust Facebook, go ahead and put your data there. If you trust Facebook and you trust your friends, go ahead and converse with sensitive data in messages and in private posts. If you trust Google, you can do the same with circles. But if you have someone in one of your circles that you don't trust, and you post to your extended circles, and that person reposts publicly, your information is out there. And the only stopgap there is it's not easy to say you can't automatically retweet someone who is an approve only type, has the privacy setting flagged. But you can still copy that text and retweet it. And so you're putting trust in others. And so long as you understand where that trust goes and you are comfortable with that, go for it.
Thank you. John?
I think we've really entered a new normal when it comes to expectations of privacy, where a 20-year-old's concerns are generally not the same as a 40-year-old's concerns. Plenty of individual exceptions. Lots of young people are very concerned about privacy, but I just think there'll be all sorts of implications from the fact that young digital natives are growing up with a very different set of expectations, and things that freak me out as a 46-year-old. Younger people, many just don't give a thought to. I think there's all sorts of interesting implications to that.
And Rob?
And I know the media likes sound bites, so here's my sound bite for you. I'll sum it all up from where I see it. In the language of security, remember the vowels A, E, I, O, U. A is for awareness, and that includes being ever vigilant of issues, however you choose to do that. E is for education. Knowledge is power. Be educated about the various technologies. I is for implementation. If knowledge is power, proper application of it is wisdom. You can have the tools and the knowledge, but if you don't apply it and use it, it's going to be worthless. O is for organization. You need to be structured and organized so you can focus those previous three things I mentioned. And last, U is for the user, because ultimately it boils down to you as being the greatest, weakest, or strongest strength in your chain of security. So A-E-I-O-U. That's really where it matters, and it begins and ends with you.
Okay. Thank you for coming this evening. I don't know about you. I've had a lot of fun. I was a little skeptical when we were going to talk about security and privacy, and was won over. And this has been a fascinating discussion for me. But I really would like to hear your thoughts. Peter is going to send out a note for feedback, and you all should know Peter. Peter's kind of the glue. Please respond. Tell us what you thought. Give us ideas for next sessions. Tell us what didn't work well for you. That's how we learn. This is a users group in a sense. So as much as possible, take ownership, help us figure out, volunteer when Peter sends out the notes. Volunteer to get involved in helping organize whatever we do next. And in particular, think about projects we can do together. I tried to push this by saying, what are some ideas for actual solutions to this? And I'm intrigued by the possibility of some of the solutions. But the more we can kind of see people who don't know each other and work together on stuff, I think the more we'll have both a strong community and we'll do really cool things. So I really appreciate the help. Ron created a video of, I think, a program you created very simply.
I didn't create it. I used it, but I didn't create it.
A very simple program that basically looks at someone's tweets and follows where you are in location, right?
Yeah. What it is it's a Python script called Creepy, spelled CRE.py. And what it allows you to do is you can put in the @username, and it will actually show where the person was at when they made this tweet. You don't even need a Twitter account, which I don't have, and I was able to pull this up. So it's really just a brief demonstration to show one of the many tools that can be used. I brought one of my laptops that has a suite on it called Backtrack. If you're interested, I'll fire it up. But it shows some tools that are used for penetration testing, social networking, engineering, and the like. So if you want to see that, just let me know.
So you can come up to the front, and we've got a video here. Thank you for coming. I told the gentleman who cleans our offices, who had to leave at 8 o'clock, that we do our best to kind of clean up the kitchen area and the like. So if you can stick around for a few minutes and your meter hasn't run out, Peter and I will be around and suggesting just where to put chairs. A lot of these little chairs go back around the cabaret tables. The big chairs, once we put tables in the middle, go around. But I'd really appreciate it if some of you can stay, help me arrange this room, and just, I guess I'll go in the kitchen and start kind of guiding around the kitchen. But thank you for coming. Please provide feedback and come next time, probably to the Minnesota Journalism Center. Thanks very much. And thank you to the panel and the folks who organized this, like Kay and Peter, the panelists. I really appreciate it. It was fun. Bye.
That was fun.
I know. Here's a good chair. It's pretty rare. You have to have a setting. You have a
What it did originally, he actually worked out
You'll find another video on your phone.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got a copy on my computer, so that's just for you to look at the.
I mean, just headline profit, I'm sure. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I know like Windows is tools and stuff. Windows maybe it's like we're have some of these add-ons on the Windows Pro. We just like and say clipboard and you say that is added. And that makes it more transparent. Say, sign this or just a letter. Well, in email, yeah, well, email is exactly right. It doesn't have right. Email is right now. That's the thing is because there isn't a universal client. I mean, you have this learning curve that works. That's one part. The other part is getting all your friends to use it or all your correspondence. If you're not using it, it doesn't mean kind of the lowest bar is to sign it. Because this piece of text and basically that is mathematically that those parentheses say describe the body in such a way
so that we're probably in good shape.
Compare to using your public key. Yes, just exciting.
Yes. Thank you, Jason.
But and then like somebody went in and altered the mail in between the parentheses, it would be that's kind of low. But the thing that's nice about that is people don't have to be doing this. Whereas if you're critical, everybody has to go.
I can usually use something else. But that's the problem is it's like
we started building cars and trucks. We'll be driving cars. This is like you've got to get the roads off the cars at the same time before you make a problem.
It has been changed since I wrote it, and I can see that other people are all different.
One of the ways people, there's other things people do like push mail solution where they can say, I can write mail and push mail, and it'll send you a letter saying, Joel sent you a mail, click here to go to his mail, and then you have it's a big problem. Just send it all over the screen.
Nice and all.
Yeah, send it on. What are things about it?
Most of the goodies we have bought back are already sold for get the best place forever. You should basically pay $90. So you can pay all the checks.
one of the new things to look for is a guy that I want to catch square and see, there's other stuff I didn't get into, like I can't say efforts. Stegography, you basically incorporate stuff into images. So, I mean, there's you can track images. I mean, there's so much.
I would be super grateful.
Okay, you guys are fine listening to that too. There's a company out in the valley. I stepped out of one job. There's a website with a number of really slick what they do is they don't just like they shoot together an application out of our services. This application that looks at code. And what it tells you is, hey, this section of your code, if you make a file this way, it will there are all sorts of metrics and information that look within the program as it's running and take that information and then they can aggregate and provide with sorts of metrics like this part of your program is running slower than this part of your program. If you were to take this code and combine it in this way, I don't know. If you look at their customer base who's already with us, I think Slashdot. Maybe not Slashdot. It's one of those. They're a 2-year-old startup and they're just really good. I don't know the details of it exactly. They have some sort of algorithm. I write that program. I don't know. That's really slick. I mean, I do network monitoring with Oculus and stuff like that. But looking within the application as it's running, that's like going, okay, your heart is connected down here. A little bit of resting in your ear. Let's replace that. Okay, just rubbing your chest up and you're standing there naked and you go, yeah, look at this valve. It's not running that well. I mean, that's crazy that they can do that with an application because usually you compile it and it's all sorting. It's compiled. It's not, so you take a cake recipe and you make the cake and you go, let's look at the flour within the cake. You can't do that.
You're trying, I can see it.
You can't see it.
Trying to avoid it.
So I don't know. That would be Jesus measures. They are coming to life. He told me about that. So good to see you. What was your name? Good to meet you too.
Thanks, everybody. That's the end.
Then I see how hard I can slide. It's only a little bit. That's a gift.
There's a hallway meeting.
AI installed that.
Again, it's not fully formed, but
also you email.
that's for application.
Well, it's general security. There's going to be a lot of discussions that are taking place.
You just don't want to duplicate that.
That's kind of on my second.
Well, there's something different.
So I decided.
I did back up, I installed some right there, and it's kind of a thing. I really enjoyed it so far. I think what I explained about it, and I think what you want to do is how did people...
Well, as a matter,
like I found out that just today I found this out.
calendar, email, SMS, usually it can also be said lazy program.
And it will
It's just easier to just say, I don't want to program an option zone
and over there. So basically,
so that way in the future, if they want to use those, then they have access.
Let me ask this.
Mission control, I no plan to use that. If you're on track at 3 figures, 3 figures right.
I know there's really technical aspects of it. I like
Then the expanded security space ones aspect.
Well, space is...
We have a second extra, they give you an extra. And bring them all together.
So there's the launch pad division, which effectively together to really
like-minded developers.
replace spaces and several other pieces.
I'm not. He's just
something like that.
Okay.
What?
Yeah, they're all discoveries. Pleasant. Of course. It'll take me a while.
But,
Once you know the beginning,
Okay, no,
Don't walk back.
I think he was feeling